And there's a lot of people out there that are listening to the show that are very much into the alien, reptilian, UFO scenario as well. So I do want to touch point on that. But I want to ask a couple of silly questions, and they're not silly questions. Is the planet flat? That's the first one.
Well, that's the thing that's come up, and I frankly don't go there, because what I do, and I've done for 30 years, is I follow my intuition, and I'll go wherever it takes me. This intuition has taken me on a journey that's put so much fantastic information before me from many endless sources, including personal experience all over the world, and I trust it. Because it's shown to deserve to be trusted, and so I would go into this whole flat Earth area if my intuition said go there, but it doesn't. So I'll leave that to other people. But this is a very important point. When you break down what reality is, and you realize that actually there is no in terms of the reality we experience as the world, there is no out there. The world's not outside of us, it's inside of us. See, I'm looking at a computer now. The computer's world is not outside of it, it's inside of it. It's projected on a screen, but it's inside the computer. And when in the deep levels of unraveling the nature of reality, which is actually a passion of mine. I just love it, because it's the foundation of everything. If we don't understand what the nature of the reality we're experiencing, how can we take control of our lives? We don't even understand what we're experiencing.
So the producer thinks that actually we live on a flat Earth. We live under a dome, and the moon and the sun is projected onto the surface of the dome.
Yeah, that's a view which he's entitled to have. Good luck to him. That's the whole thing about freedom. Yeah. You have the freedom to come to conclusions and have an opinion. This is the freedom that's being taken away by the imposition of opinion, and the imposition of what you can question and what you can't. But if you look at what I'm actually saying, and I've been saying for a long time before it became much more mainstream among many scientists, is that we live in a form of matrix, a form of artificial reality, like a very advanced computer game. And it's interesting that the physics of computer games and the physics of our reality are basically the same. And we decode and experience reality basically in the same way that a computer does. A computer will take a Wi-Fi field of information and it will decode it into images on a screen. Well, we are taking, if you like, cosmic Wi-Fi information in the form of waveform, which the five senses pick up and turn into electrical information, which are then communicated to the brain, which then decodes that information into digital holographic information, which we perceive as outside of us, which is actually in our heads. And scientists have started to realize that this is how we create reality. So this is an interesting area, or a fundamental area, because what this computer in front of me puts on the screen is dictated by the information it receives and the information it decodes. Now, if you control the information it receives, you control the information it decodes, you control what goes on the screen. And if you control the information that humanity receives and decodes, you control what goes on its screen, which is what this whole matrix is all about, this fake reality, which was so brilliantly visually portrayed in the Matrix movie series. And therefore, where I'm going with this in terms of the flat Earth, I mean, is the Earth flat? Is the Earth round? Well, click enter. Which one do you want? Because the rules and regulations of what we call nature are merely like the rules and regulations that dictate the parameters of a computer game. If you want to change the game and the parameters and the limitations, then change the rules of the game. And this is why, for instance, when people have these near-death experiences and they leave the body, they experience a completely different reality because they're no longer locked into that five-sense decoding system that is feeding them a particular reality. And you know, when people realize, and I've done this in my talks around the world, they realize how different the reality we're experiencing is to the one that we think we're experiencing and we think we're aware of, then it's a big, massive mind opener for people, because the world we're experiencing is so fantastically different to the one we think we are that things like shape-shifting reptilians just pale into insignificance in terms of far outness when you realize the level of illusion that the very reality we're experiencing is. I've got a quote here which would just sum up what I'm saying. It's by a scientist called Robert Lanza from a book called Biocentrism, and he's explaining how we see a flame, right? Simple thing, you're looking at a candle, you're looking at a flame. And this is how he explains the process of seeing a candle. The flame is emitting photons, or tiny packets of electromagnetic energy, each pulsing electrically and magnetically. These individual electromagnetic waves strike the human retina, and if and only if the waves happen to measure between 400 and 700 nanometers in length from crest to crest, then their energy is just right to deliver a stimulus to the 8 million cone-shaped cells in the retina. Each in turn send an electrical pulse to a neighbor neuron, and on up through the line this goes at 250 miles an hour until it reaches the optical lobe of the brain in the back of the head. There, a cascading complex of neurons fire from the incoming stimuli, and we subjectively perceive this experience as a yellow brightness occurring in a place we have been conditioned to call the external world. And here's a quote that kind of sums up the nature of the reality. It's by a guy called Alan Watts, who was a very awake Western mystic from some decades ago. He said, without the brain, the world is devoid of light, heat, weight, solidity, motion, space, time, or any other imaginable feature. All these phenomena are interactions or transactions of vibrations with a certain arrangement of neurons, which then brings us to the classic scene in the Matrix movie, where Neo says to Morpheus, "This isn't real?" And Morpheus says, "What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, taste, and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. Now, what if a hidden hand was controlling those electrical signals? They are then massively dictating the way your brain interprets those signals, and thus the reality you think you're experiencing. This is how the Matrix works. And when you get to this level, you're well beyond what is Trump tweeting today, because that's all diversion. This is the core. We have kept from us the very nature of the reality you're experiencing. Now think of this. You keep from the population the understanding of how we are experiencing reality and creating it, but those in the shadows absolutely know how it works. Think of the power dynamic between those who know and the population that doesn't. And that's why it's kept from us. That's why, scientists lose their funding if they get too near the truth.
So do you think, when you talk about the Matrix and seeing the world differently, I'm asking this on a personal level here, because obviously you know that I'm a medium. I talk to people's loved ones from the other side of the world, or the other side of the ether, if you want to call it that.
Right.
Do you think then we are encoded slightly different, so we are able to see that other code? Do you think it's something that we're breaking the code to see that matrix?
Well, I would put it like this. You're listening to a radio station.
Yeah.
And another radio station is interfering.
Yeah.
So you have the main radio station, symbolic of the world we're living in, but you have this interference because basically you're dealing with frequencies, and frequencies that are close to another frequency, they interfere. The main frequency is still the dominant one, but there's an interference because another frequency is there that's very close to the dominant one. That's what interference is. So what, for me, mediums and what people call psychics are doing is they have the ability to expand their range of frequency so that they can connect with frequencies beyond those that normal five sense reality would tap into and be influenced by. Now, when you talk about mediums and psychics, there are those that are clearly operating like that, where they sit on stages and say, "I've got a Mary," or they'll do readings for people, or they'll channel some other consciousness, and people will say, "Yes, that's a medium, that's a psychic."
Yeah,
but what I do is access, and this is what I've been doing for 30 years. I had a massive experience in Peru in 1991, which triggered this open. I tap into these things also. I don't tap into, if you like, entities and discarnate entities that I can then, be a medium for, but I tap into information because we in Five Sense program operate in a very narrow band of information, and if you can expand your awareness beyond that, how do you expand your awareness beyond that? By not being trapped in the belief that that is all there is. I live in the real world, mate. No, well, actually, you live in a frequency band that's so tiny it's laughable. Open your mind. And so, for instance, I spend most of my life, and I have done since I was a kid, daydreaming. I don't meditate. I don't, sit cross-legged on the floor. I've got arthritic knees. I couldn't do that anyway. I remember once, just a quick one, going to India. I'd been to India once, and I wanted to go around these places and see some of these. I went to this temple, and I realised that in India they don't have chairs and stuff. So they sit cross-legged on the floor doing the lotus position and stuff, and all the kind of new ages that go with this thing. So I actually took a folding garden chair with me on the plane. So when I went into these temples, there were all these people, literally they were, lots of them in the lotus position. And I'm sitting on a garden chair because I can't sit on the floor, so I had my own chair. And they thought I was crazy, which no one's ever said before. Anyway, what we are doing through daydreaming is allowing the mind to expand beyond the conscious mind. The conscious mind is always looking for stimulus. This is what the mind chatter is all about. If people just stop and quietly listen to their own mind, they will hear the mind chatter. And if you listen to it for long enough, you realize, actually, I'm observing my own mind. So what is it doing the observing? Consciousness beyond five sense mind. And once you start to expand into those areas, what you do is you get massive insights. You get massive intuitive knowings that come to you. So like Einstein said, none of the things that his breakthrough moments, none of them came through the rational mind. They all came through basically what I'm describing now. So I'm in kind of daydream mode most of the time because I don't confine my mind and say you can only operate in five senses. I say go where you want to go, girl. And and let's see where it goes. And it literally is this phrase: free your mind. And when I started out in the early 1990s, I would research 5 sense information and come to conclusions. But from about the mid 1990s, it went the other way. I was coming to conclusions, and then the 5 sense information would support the conclusions. Because if you allow anyone can do it. This is not Buddha sitting cross-legged on the mountain. Anyone can do it. You let your mind go free, and I find that if you move your self-identity from I am my name, I am my life story, I am my color, my class, my race, to I am consciousness having those experiences, that shift in self-identity shifts your point of observing the world. It expands your mind, because your mind is now experiencing itself and self-identifying itself from a much more expanded level. And you find that you start to get insights, and you start to see synchronicity in your life, and coincidences start to happen that never happened before when you were confined to 5 sense reality alone. And it's this mind opening that the system is terrified that will happen on a mass scale, and is starting to happen around the world. It really is, because they have to confine us on their postage stamp to keep us in the perceptual prison, which keeps us in the, for want of a term, it's not really the physical prison.
Can I just say also, just for listeners, everything we've been covering so far, especially when I asked you a question about mediums, is I have actually read the part about the mediums and psychics in your book, so I know it's in there and in depth as well. And it is an amazing book. It does cover all the aspects of what we've been talking about, the Trump and the world, etc., etc. There is a couple of other questions that I do need to put to you also. One of them is, it keeps moving, hang on a second. One of them is, do you know anything about the Denver International Airport conspiracy, underground tunnels and images that are on the walls there? Do you know anything about that?
Oh, yeah. When I had gone through the period where I was considered mad in Britain, in historic levels of he's mad.
Don't worry, I've got a question about that as well.
I started getting invites to go and speak in America, and I went on. Well, I am going to call it a speaking tour. But my tongue is so far in my cheek it will make a hole if I continue, because it wasn't a speaking tour at all. That's what it's supposed to be. I was told I had a series of events, and I spent 3 months talking to next to nobody. I made a lot of connections, which were very useful later, but this was in 1996. I had 2 talks that actually anyone came to. One was in Vancouver later in the 3 months, but the first one, the one I actually flew into America to speak at, was a multi-speaker conference in Denver. So I landed at Denver Airport. And one of the things that struck me, because I didn't really know a lot about it then, this is 1996, was it was a brand new airport built by, what do they call it, the New World Airport Authority. No one seems to know what that is. There's a sign there. And we land at this purpose-built airport in this area of flat land on which the airport was built. They could have built it however they liked. There was no landscape or built confines at all. And as we land, the pilot says, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but it's going to be a long taxi back to the gate because of the way the airport is laid out. And it was incredible. I mean, it's not a big airport, but it was a hell of a taxi back, having landed it. And I thought, well, that's bloody weird. And then you walk through it, and you see strange murals on the wall, which are highly symbolic of a dystopian society. You see gargoyle reptilian figures. You see plaques about Freemasons and the Freemasonic involvement in it. And then I went to this conference in Denver. And it was multi-speaker conference over several days, and it was a big eye-opener for me on many levels. But one of the speakers was someone who focused on Denver Airport. It's a very, very strange place. I mean, if you go into the levels of energetic sensitivity, it's a very, very weird place energetically. And later in that non-speaking tour, when I was actually speaking in New England to a massive audience in someone's front room, there was about 5 people there, and I turn up at this house, and the guy's got to go to work, so I'm on this house alone, and there was a video pile, and I put one of the videos in, and this guy started speaking, fascinating, and it was a guy called Schneider. And Phil Schneider was someone who came out when he realized I think he had cancer, and started talking about the fact that he was one of the people that helped to build these DUMBs, these deep underground military bases, that he was involved in building one of those under Denver Airport. And it started to make total sense to me. This is well back in the 90s, because of this weird experience that I'd had at Denver Airport. And he talks there about it being an underground alien base. And over the years, as I've traveled around America and talked to enormous numbers of people in so many parts of America, and you do the same in Australia with Pine Gap, another deep underground military base there, which is very weird. I've had experiences related to that as well. And you start to connect these dots and these recurring themes that these bases, at Denver Airport will be one, have a security system where the lower you go, because they're all in levels, deeply and seriously compartmentalized, to the point where people have to be weighed in and weighed out so they don't weigh any different. In other words, they haven't got anything they didn't come in with before. And they go down and down and down, and each level going down needs a bigger and bigger and bigger security clearance. And it's very clear from talking to people over the years who've worked there, and people who've studied this. I've been doing this for 30 years full time. You do meet a lot of people and gather a lot of information. It's very clear that at least the major ones, the major underground bases, open out in the lowest levels into levels that are where human scientists and human military interact with non-human entities, like what I call the greys and reptilian entities. They have been described many times to me in these underground bases. And this brings me to something else, which, again, we could talk forever because the dots keep connecting.
Absolutely.
I have concluded some time ago, not on the basis of nothing, but on the basis of cumulative information, that this technological sub-reality that we talked about today, Nick, but let's put it this way. The technology to make it happen and to unfold it as fast as possible is not being randomly discovered. The BBC ran 2 documentaries on Silicon Valley. I think it was last year. And they were very superficial, but there were some interesting things in it. And I remember this. There was a sequence of garage doors in Silicon Valley where they were saying this was discovered by this garage door, this was discovered by this behind this garage door, and this garage door so-and-so was developed. And so what I thought when I watched that was I bet anyone watching that who's in this hidden hand is going to be saying, hey lads, ditch the garage doors, they're going to suss it, mate, okay? Think of another cover story. We don't want another garage door. Because, let's think about this, we are seeing this technological transformation of human society happen in a seamless way as the technology is played out just at the time they need to push it on to the next stage. Do we really believe that they're sitting round a table, tapping their fingers, waiting for someone to come in to announce that some geek in Santa Clara has just miraculously at the right time developed a piece of technology that will allow this control system to go to the next stage. Nonsense. What I'm saying is this technology that's being unfolded has always been there. It's been there because these non-human races, these so-called aliens, they have this technology. They have it in other realities. They have it in other worlds. But humanity has not until recently been at an intellectual, not a consciousness, not a wisdom, an intellectual level that it could work with it. And so since Victorian times, particularly since Victorian times, this intellectual level, this technological mind has been developed and developed and developed to the point where we now have the intellectual capacity to build our own prison. And this technology, not all of it, but the key technology of this technological transformation is not coming from behind garage doors. It's coming out of these military underground bases, and I say that ultimately it's being handed over piece by piece, stage by stage, by these non-human entities, groups, races that interact with the human elite in the lowest areas of these underground bases.
I totally agree. Before we even go on, because there are questions upon questions about the reptilians, UFOs, etc.
Right.
And it's a really interesting format for me as well, because I've had experiences with UFOs, blah blah. There is a question that I need to put to you. It's more of a comment and then a question. It's being posted by Scott. I watched the Terry Wogan program all those years ago, where David came out and raised his head above the parapet. It was such a brave thing for him to do, and I still have questions and doubts, but I am now understanding and seeing what he said way back then. Now can you say thank you, please? So he wishes to say thank you to you for opening his eyes that many years ago, like all of us, because we all saw that.
Well, that's very kind, but you know something, a lot of people, they'll see that Wogan interview as a real negative thing and a really bad thing to happen. And I tell you, it weren't nice to experience. But when I look back at it, it was a gift. Because the historic levels of ridicule that followed, where I couldn't walk down any street in Britain without being laughed at, going into a bar, there was uproar. And I talked at universities in that period and was ridiculed by maybe 1,000 people sometimes. What that does, it either destroys you or it gives you the gift of letting go of the prison that most people live in, which is the fear of what other people think. So you're throwing me questions tonight, and I'm answering them. I'm not answering them having gone through mental gymnastics, saying what can I say here and what should I leave out so the listener thinks I'm okay, so the listener thinks I'm not mad. I don't care. I care about what's happening, not what people think of me. That's completely irrelevant. And that gift was given to me by the mass ridicule caused by the Wogan interview. So I would say I look back at it with affection, but I don't look back at it in a negative way at all.
No, I mean, when I announced you were coming on the show, I had probably about 90% of people jumping in here going, yeah, we can't wait to hear what he's got to say now. There was a 10%, and some of them were like old school friends as well, saying, are you mad? This guy's a nutter. And I'm like...
What's that? Perception control. That's what it is. It's perception control.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I may be many things, but mad I'm not. But if anyone wants to call me, if anybody wants to call me mad, that's fine. Because being called mad by idiots is a compliment. People should remember that when they're being ridiculed.
Actually, do you know what? My observation of you, David, because I've never met you in person, and I hope to do so very soon. My observation of you is actually you're a very spiritual person. You're very connected to the ether, the matrix, all sorts of stuff. As you say, you connect. You get your information fed to you in one way. You don't meditate as such, but you get fed information as a way that a medium would do. And Scott did continue with a little bit more, because he says to me, it says in there is, what was the event in Peru that opened you up?
Well, that's quite a long story. I'll keep it short. I had this, again, intuition. It was nothing more, that I had to go to Peru, and I was earning no money. I'd left the BBC, or the BBC had left me, but that was a gift as well, because it set me free to pursue this, because the BBC was basically killing me. I mean, the corporate media world, or the media world, oh my goodness me, it was a nightmare. I mean, they used to say at the BBC, they get so confused they stab each other in the chest instead of the back. So it was another gift. But I had this intuition to go to Peru, so I went purely because this intuition was urging me to. And I had 3 weeks there in Cuzco, Machu Picchu, and Puno, and all these places that followed an incredible synchronistic series of coincidences. And I ended up on a hillside near a place called Siustani, which is they say is an old Inca site, though I think it goes back further, which is at about 13,000 feet, just down the road really from Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world, they say. And I was in this tourist bus, just me and a tourist guide and the driver, and I'm being driven away from Siustani, a beautiful, beautiful place. And I'm just doing my usual thing. I'm daydreaming out the window, and I saw this hill in front of me as we were coming out, and all I could hear in my head as I looked at it was "Come to me, come to me, come to me, come to me." And I thought, I mean, I'm not that far after presenting the snooker. And this frickin' hill is talking to me, or it seems like it is. Come to me, come to me. So I asked the guy to stop the bus. It was more of a bus taxi thing. And I said I won't be long, but I was about 40 minutes or an hour or something like that. And I went up the hill. And when I got up there, I was looking out. It was a beautiful view across a lake into the distant mountains. And I felt this magnetic feeling, vibration in the soles of my feet. They started to vibrate. I'd had it before in Rye, when this whole thing, in Isle of Wight, when this whole thing started some time before, about a year before. And then I started feeling energy going in the top of my head, right in the middle of the top of my head and through my body and coming up through the other way. And then my arms went out at 45 degrees, which, you do it for a minute, your arms start to ache, but my arms were like that for about 45 minutes, and I felt nothing until it was over. But then, of course, it was agony once it was over. And what was over? Well, this energy is going through my head, and my arms are out at 45 degrees, and I'm standing under a piercing, cloudless, dominated by Peruvian sun sky, not a cloud in the sky, beautiful day, and this it's not a voice, it's like a thought form. I mean, you as a medium will understand what I'm saying. Sometimes it does seem so clear it's a voice. This was more of a thought form, and it said, they'll be talking about this 100 years from now. That's how it started. And then it said, it will be over when you feel the rain. Now, as I've just said, I'm standing under a clear blue sky. There's not a cloud in the sky. And I thought at that point, this is crazy. I am going crazy. But the energy was coming through my body. My body was starting to shake. And over the next period of 40 minutes, 45 minutes or so, I was coming in and out of consciousness, in the sense of like you drive a car and you can't remember the previous 2 miles. And this energy was getting stronger and stronger. And at one time, when I came back to my conscious mind and was aware of the landscape again, I noticed that over the distant mountains there was a light grey mist. And I watched it very quickly get darker and darker, and it started to move towards me. And whether people talk about fronts, well, I mean, if someone put this in a movie, what actually happened, they'd say, that's ridiculous. That's so far-fetched. Who thought of that one? This storm comes out of these mountains, and the clouds get very dark. But as they're coming towards me, I'm still under a clear blue sky with the sun shining. And the front of the clouds was basically dead straight. I've described it as like pulling curtains across the sky. And it's coming towards me, and as it got closer, the rain was stair rod. It was a wall of rain coming towards me. By this time, my body is shaking like I'm plugged into the mains. And then the rain hit me. And as it hit me, the energy disappeared, dispersed. And I'm stood there, instantly drenched because of the scale of the rain. And my legs then went like Bambi. My shoulders were agony because of my arms up there. And something happened. I had energy pouring out my hands for a little while that day, well into the evening. And then pouring out the bottom of my feet all night. I was fidgeting all night. I couldn't sleep with it. And that's when this shift started to take place, where my mind started to expand. And what happened? This actually brings us to the Wogan show. Is that I've described it as like living in a bubble of reality, a bubble of information, and someone coming along and sticking a pin in it, and it pops, and suddenly everything that's outside the bubble starts pouring in, and you're trying to process it. And what happened to me, it only lasted 3 months, the Wogan show was in the middle of it, is that it was like pressing too many keys on a computer, and the computer froze. It said, I can't process this. I was getting concepts, insights. It was just this. I mean, you will have experienced it, I'm sure, in your experience.
Yes,
you get this massive info. You can't process it. It's just too much. And that was the 3 months when Ike's gone mad. And in the middle of that, I went on the Wogan show, prime time. About 17 million people were watching that because of the publicity. And what then happened is, after about 3 months, the computer unfroze. And I was. People were saying to me who knew me, "Well, I thought you'd gone mad, Dave. You're the same bloke we used to know." Well, I seem to be, because I was David again, if you like.
Yep.
But the way I saw the world was completely transformed. I could now see how dots connected instead of just dots. But what happened, of course, is the public who saw that massive publicity in the 3 months, and the media that was responsible for that massive publicity in the 3 months, they went into time warp mode. So although, if you like, I was, as I was before, if you like, in terms of the person I appeared to be, but seeing the world completely differently, people's perceptions of me continued to be the guy in the shell suit on the Wogan show. And that went on all the way through the 90s, and has massively, dramatically transformed in the last few years. But it went on for a long time.